Somebody let me know.
All right, welcome to the show, everybody. It is a special report because we've got Errata Drop Day! Yay! Joining us all from all over the world, we've got the one and only Menoth John. Say hello, Menoth John.
Hello, Menoth John.
I've got Maelstrom and PG Semi-Auto Magic from Moosemachine. Say hello, Moosemachine.
Hello.
Hello.
And of course, we have Scott Tellerico from Party Foul to round things out because, of course, he's probably being most affected by Errata right now because of all the questions he's getting for the team championships. Say hello, Scott.
Hello.
So let's start right off the top, guys. Have we all had a chance to look through the Errata, and let's sort of give our general feelings before we go sort of into the nitty-gritty. Menoth John, how do you feel about the Errata?
Well, as president for life of Warmachine and Hordes, I feel as though I have done a fabulous job on this particular Errata. You know, I had him working night and day. I had the whip cracking on Matt Wilson. He might have liked it a little more than I would have otherwise expected him to, but you know, we burned the midnight oil. We built a wall around the Errata, and we're going to make GW pay for it. So overall, I think we're in a pretty positive spot after this.
Excellent. Scott, I think you're probably most affected because you had people breathing down your neck about the OTC coming up. How are your feelings? Is it good that it came early?
I'm fine with the Errata coming early. It actually makes it a little easier for us. It's just the Scorn one we're waiting for. I think they may have missed the mark on some of the stuff, but we'll see what happens.
Well, we'll see how it plays out. Maelstrom, you're pretty happy, right? Legion,
yeah, I'm pretty happy.
Largely unaffected. Your tentacles not nerfed to hell?
Yeah, the points surprisingly didn't go up. The tentacles spawn in the maintenance phase now, which is not that big a deal unless you like janky shit. But yeah, they get rear attack, which is a buff, so I'm happy.
Cool. And last, of course, PG Semi-Auto Magic, COC saw nothing but a buff, right?
Yeah, they got a little bit of points drop. LeConte got armor against ranged instead of defense against ranged because, you know, realistically, when everything's Def 10 anyway, nobody's missing at 12.
I think the biggest bit of news, though, isn't just that the Errata dropped today. It's actually from the Insider that was dropped at the same time along with an FAQ. And I don't know if everybody got a chance to read this, but I think this is pretty important. PP is changing the way that they're going to deliver their products. There will be no more cards with your box. You're going to have to either go to the interwebs and download it from a PDF or get War Room or something along those lines. The rules will now be free. The cards will now be free, and it's open season on being able to put those cards out on the interwebs. What do you feel like? Is this a good move or a bad move, guys? Let's start with Menoth John.
Well, I think it's a move that they probably needed to make, given the fact that how fundamentally they've changed their rules update process. If they're going to evolve their rules at the kind of pace that it's pretty apparent that they're going to, it's always a frustration as a player to have a card that doesn't have the real rules on it. I myself have been a longtime user of Warmachine. I don't play in a lot of competitive stuff. I know some of the competitive fellows are maybe a little bit more gun shy at using the war rooms for their tournament. I think it's a good move and a necessary business move on their part.
Scott, let's as a tournament runner, how do you feel about the change from moving away from physical media for the cards and such?
I mean, I can see why they're doing it because, like John said, they're just basically they can get you the product faster, which is always good. I think they're going to get a lot of backlash for it. I mean, I just spent $20 on a Khador deck that now is effectively going to be garbage. So, not including my Mad Dogs, which I have 10 of. But yeah, that's more to talk about that later. But running events, I basically use War Room for most of the stuff that I do anyways. I'm pretty fast with it, and I have no issues with it. I guess their data says that most people use War Room. I'm not sure how they gathered that information. I think they're wrong. But I think you're going to see backlash on this for sure. It's going to be all over
I think there's definitely. there'll definitely be some backlash, a little bit of nerd rage, as we like to call it, especially from those people that are limited in their ability to use, media, I don't know, internet media devices. I can't imagine it'd be a huge backlash, but we'll see where it goes. On top of that, they've also said that they're now going to be more interactive with the audience, and they've admitted their mistake on the way that they released Mark III. I think this is a pretty big deal for a company to suck this up. PG Semi-Automatic, you're a PG. Do you see this as a move in a positive direction, or do you think this might be more convoluted, the change in the way that they're going to test stuff in the future?
Well, I like the way that they're going to test stuff in the future. Also, I'm glad to see that the starter kits, the battle boxes and the 2-player starter kit, are actually going to be exempt from this. We're still going to have cards with them. And to be clear, they're not saying that cards are going away. They're just saying that they are no longer going to print them. They're going to have options for people to be able to print their own cards, and we're going to be able to get the PDFs for free of all the cards, as well as have them as a paid option in War Room. So it's not that cards are disappearing, it's just that PP's no longer handing them out for free.
Yeah, and they're not going to include them in the books anymore. The books are now going to be more fluff and hobby oriented. That's a big deal, and that's a big change in direction. But I think it's more important that we talk about the actual errata, because I think that's what people are actually here to talk about. Maelstrom, do we have any general buzz coming from the people on the boards at all?
No, they're just kind of waiting for us to get into it.
To actually talk about it.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's do that then. People who are watching us live, if you have questions or comments as we go through these things, and if you find that one of us is wrong on something we're talking about, or you've got a different opinion, make sure you tell Maelstrom. He'll make sure that information gets to us. Let's start right at the top of the errata document. Change in flight. On page 31, we can now replace the second sentence of flight with the following: it can advance through obstructions and other models if it has enough movement to move completely past them. I don't have a lot of models that have flight playing mercs. So, Maelstrom, I think you had a comment on how this changed things. How does that change things?
I don't think it really does. I know before, I don't think it changed that much at all. I think it's just a wording thing. I don't see what difference than it was before. Scott may be able to, or John may be able to elaborate on that, but I don't see a whole lot of change there.
I think it's a wording change. It doesn't jump out at me as anything different.
Yeah.
All right. Then we'll move right along to melee range. A model's melee range is limited to its front arc. We know that this is a fix. There was a bit of a problem with things being able to now get into back arcs quite easily. So this is a fix. Let's go to Scott. Scott, how does this fix affect the game in the current state?
Well, it was the Kayazi Eliminators got that nice buff when they ruled that you could charge over the model, turn around after moving completely past them, which I thought was a weird ruling because, we've all played Mark II and we're used to the way the rules were. Now this, I think, changes that back to the old way it was in Mark II.
It makes far more sense. The next one down the list is power attacks. A model cannot target a friendly model with a power attack at all anymore. No power attacks. Can you use any type of push, pull, jank at all? Menoth, John, we've talked about how throws in particular is a bit of janky crap. How do you think this affects the game overall in this? Is this the best fix we could come up with?
I'm highly in favor of how I changed this rule. I think that flying circus combinations are really dumb. I tried to pound it through their heads. I had Souls out behind the woodshed for at least 20 minutes on this when he on Mark III to begin with. Didn't get the message, didn't get the memo. But now there will be no throwing snakes and all the other crap that used to exist. So once and for all, I finally fixed this. You're all welcome.
Scott, how do you feel about this? Is this enough of a change to throw? Because I think that was everybody's major concern. Is this enough of a change to throw, or do we still need to see more changes?
No, this does help a lot because a lot of times you'd pick up your own model to throw at a caster or something, and this will stop definitely stop all the stupid throws. Yeah, it's going to definitely fix it. Now it's got to be on the enemy model, and that can change everything, right?
All right, good job, John. I didn't mean to question you, man. I just wanted to double check.
Don't make me come through the internet.
Page 68, spray attacks. ignore cloud effect terrain when determining if the attacker's line of sight is completely blocked to a model under a spray template. I am not 100% sure how big a change this is to the original rule. Is this just a change in wording, George?
I thought this fixes the problem of a cloud effect completely blocking a spray.
Before, when you sprayed and something blocked the line of sight of it, the spray would stop. So normally, when you spray into a forest, it only goes 3 inches into a forest unless you can see deeper for whatever reason. But now this gets around a cloud blocking your spray because that didn't make any sense whatsoever.
And there was a ruling earlier that cloud, like regular clouds, generated clouds, you could spray through, but the terrain clouds you could not spray through. And that's what they fixed. If you notice, it says cloud effect terrain has changed, and that's the big change there.
So it unifies all clouds, right, George?
Yeah, all clouds are now the same for purposes of spraying.
All clouds matter. Excellent.
Okay, we're going to go into the big changes in Colossals, and this is sort of a lot of people consider this a overall buff to Colossals in general. We have 2 changes. One change basically that Colossals can no longer be affected by grievous wounds. For those of you that didn't understand what was going on with grievous wounds, you could use grievous wounds to basically shut Colossals down to a certain degree, and it for that large point of models to not be able to heal in any given way was pretty nerfy, I guess. Scott, is this a big change to Colossals, or is it just a small thing?
No, this will be pretty huge because there's some feats out there that would be affected just by the grievous wounds, and not having that apply anymore, that it'll actually make them more survivable and a little more viable on the table. Bye-bye, Alton Ashley.
Yeah, exactly. And Alton Ashley is no longer just a colossal killer. Impact attacks changing. I admittedly never use infantry because I can never wrap my small brain around how they work. However, going over to PG Semi-Automagic, who does use a lot of infantry, impact attacks have been slightly changed. If cavalry model chooses to make an impact attack against its charged target, before making any impact attacks, the model turns to face the charged target and its charged movement ends. How big a change is that?
It's not a huge one. It fixes a weird side case where what you could do is you could charge in at a weird direction, impact attack your charged target, kill it, and then be facing a completely different direction at the end because you never made it to the step where it says at the end of your charge, rotate to point at the target, because impact attacks happen during movement. And what this allowed people to do is say I want to attack your caster's back arc. I could charge something behind your back arc as my charge target, make an impact attack at it, but turn my model almost 180 degrees away from the impact target so that I could attack your caster's back arc. What this does is it fixes it so that the impact attack on your charge target ends your movement and faces you towards that target so you don't have jank like that happen.
It's just basically cleaning up the rules. I don't think it ever happened that often, but this
no,
is straight.
But that was the way to fix that.
Yeah.
Okay. Make sure that it doesn't get asked about on the forums once a week.
Yeah.
Threshold and Frenzy. Make one attack against the model at charge with the highest POW melee weapon that has range to the target. Scott, or actually, let's throw this over at Manath John. Is this a change, or is this just a wording clarification?
I might need a little bit of backup from Scott and George on this one, or anybody, because I think what this fixes is that prior to this, there was some selectivity as to what weapon you would use on that, which would allow you to possibly pull off some other effects like a knockdown or something like that. Is that, Scott, am I right?
I could be very right. I think it's just giving you, because like again in Mark II, it was always the highest POW weapon. That was just the default, but I don't think that default was there anymore. So people could like opt to take a 1-inch melee range with a Warbeast instead of their 2-inch, and then be out of range or something like that. So this gets that all and straightened it up.
So Scott, one of the problems was, say I've got a bite attack that's 0.5 melee, and it's a POW 18, and I've got a swipe attack that is 2 inches, but it's only a POW 13. What could happen is my charge would be in range with the reach weapon, so my charge would complete, and then I would have to attack with the highest POW weapon, irregardless of whether it could reach or not. So then the attack would fail, and even though theoretically it charged something, nothing would happen. So what they've done is they fixed that so that now when you charge, whichever weapon you can make the attack with, actually will make the attack, whether or not it is the highest POW anymore.
Okay.
So it basically resets it to working as intended.
Yes.
Right, which is the way it's funny. We've always played it anyways, so.
Yeah, the right way to play it. Let's scan down to page 7, everybody, because everything else is sort of a repeat of the rules. It's just to go through if you're not familiar with an errata document, when they make a change to one rule, they're then, of course, going to have to go back through all their other different books and make sure that the rules are changed on the coinciding pages. However, I think what's most interesting after those basic changes that we just mentioned is the model errata, which is going to affect a few people massively. And the first one down the list is Signar. Signar took, I want to say there's going to be a bit of salt in Signar tonight. Signar took quite a beating overall. And one of them, right off the top, is Kane, I believe, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, he now has to spend a focus point to use one of his empowered shots. He no longer just gets to choose an attack type. He has to actually spend his ill-gotten focus to get that.
This is a massive, like, he just got his left nut cut off, for sure.
Yeah, exactly. Kane is no longer superpowered, is I think.
Yeah,
Scott, go into detail.
Well, that just before that happened, I mean, it was very easy for you to throw your own model within 4 inches of the enemy Warcaster, have Kane activate, get his additional shot from Reinhold, and then proceed to trick shot off the knockdown model and just rule the world and just basically blow the caster off the table because of the trick shot. But now that he has to spend a focus every time he does it, that's going to be very hard to pull off now.
They've also I think there's just a wording change on his overkill rules as well. I mean, overall, how do we feel? Is Kane just unplayable garbage, or is this a good change?
I mean, it's something had to be balanced out. He's still going to be good. He still has he's still playable. Comes down a notch. So instead of being S tier, he's an A tier.
Dominic Darius or Captain Darius got a slight change to the crane rules. He can now take one other friendly large-based or smaller model and move it 2 inches. George, you played a lot of Darius. Is this a big change?
No, this is mostly a wording clarification. But the one thing it does mean is that he can't crane a battle engine. He can't crane huge bases. It's just the large bases. But I think it's almost completely just a wording fix.
All right, next on the list, Captain Haley. That's Haley 1 got a nerf. They've reduced her amount of Warjack points, and they've altered temporal barrier to enemy models beginning their activations in the spellcaster's command range suffer -2 speed. A lot of people sort of crying foul since Haley 1 was not being played that much. Do you have any sort of comments on this, John? Is there any reason for this change?
I think it's a continuation of, and correct me if I'm wrong, did they change temporal barrier going into Mark III to be command range, or is this a change from control range to command range?
It's a change from control to command, because while within the control, it's still -2 death, and if it's in the command, you suffer -2 speed, so they made it more complicated. Mark II was you couldn't run or charge.
Yeah, and I think that this is another kind of tip of the hat, even though maybe she wasn't getting a ton of play, it is a tip of the hat to reduction in negative play experiences, because that big bubble of -2 speed is a problem, and I think it can, getting told no that hard for that long, especially in a faction that has something like the Squire to bump that out is it's tough. So I'm suck it, Signar.
I disagree with that just because in today's game, -2 speed does not limit you from doing anything.
That's true.
Where in Mark II, it would mean you couldn't charge. But now it doesn't change anything. You can still charge, you just take your -2 speed. So I'm not really sure why they did this.
Good.
Yeah, we'll have to see how it plays out. It might be in respect to some. I mean, we don't really know. It might be in respect to another model coming out down the board as well. So
Don't give me
could
that
be
design
interesting.
space crap.
Yeah, who knows? Who knows? I mean, it's funny. We'll see how it plays out. I think the Signar players are frustrated because they weren't really playing her in the first place, so they're just seeing that as a straight up nerf to a model that didn't need to be nerfed. Haley 2 replaced Deflection with Force Field, which is a different spell altogether.
Wow.
The spellcaster does not suffer blast or collateral damage, cannot become knocked down. When the enemy AoE ranged attack deviates in the point its spellcaster's control range after the deviation distance is rolled, you choose the deviation direction. And a slight change in Time Bomb, that a model directly hit by Time Bomb suffers -2 speed and death for 1 round. Again, I have not been playing Signar. I cannot comment on these changes.
The Time Bomb change is huge.
Okay.
Tell
me about it, George.
Well, now it says directly hit. It used to be hit. So it used to be you
deviate that template.
Yeah.
Yeah. The force field's actually really good for her not being able to be knocked down. I mean, now that the throws have kind of been changed, but that'll definitely keep her a little more survivable.
Okay, guys. So you're saying that it's a slight buff to Haley as well as a debuff on Time Bomb, or sorry, a nerf on Time Bomb and a buff on Force Field. Is that what you're saying, Scott?
Well, it's a buff for her, but before Deflection helped her whole faction, right? But now it's just on her. So I mean, it's always nice when your caster can't be knocked down. That is a lot of ways to keep you alive. So,
boy, that was such a strong buff though for such a huge area back when it was Deflection. I don't know.
Well, it's definitely a nerf for the rest of her faction, but keeps her alive.
Yeah, there is that.
All right, we have a Coleman. Lord General Coleman Striker, I believe that's Striker 3, sees a change to Lightning Charge. Replace the first sentence in Lightning Charge rules with the following: when a friendly faction model makes an impact attack or a charge attack while in Striker's control range, the attack automatically hits and gains an additional die on the damage roll. This is his feat. George, again, this is another model you were playing quite often. How does this changing the feat for you?
I'm not 100% sure because I don't have the original one to look at. Does anybody have an original card around? The thing I'm wondering about is that they remove the option to boost out of activation. Because I don't know if that was in the first line.
The original rule read, when a friendly faction model makes a mount attack or a charge attack while in Striker's control range, the attack automatically hits and gains an additional die on the damage roll. Lightning Charge lasts for 1 round.
Yeah, so the big change there is with the change from a mount being a special attack to now being just a melee attack, they have made it either an impact attack or a charge attack. So you have to be doing a charge to get the bonus. It was before, if you just walked up and made an attack with your horse, you would get the auto hit and the extra die. So they are making you actually charge to get the feat.
Okay. Change to Minuteman. Bounding Leap is now any effects that prevent charging also prevent this model from using Bounding Leap. So just bringing that in line with everything else, so it's not just sort of a ignore all ability. And Flak Field. This model is not affected by Flak Field, stopping it from being killed by its own Flak Field. I think we could probably move on from those two unless anybody has a comment.
Nope.
Okay. Stormsmith Grenadiers, Voltaic Vortex. Replace the text of Voltaic Vortex with the following. On a direct hit against an enemy model before rolling damage, push models within 2 inches of the model directly hit 2 inches directly toward it in the order you choose. I've never played a Stormsmith Grenadier, so no idea.
Not a lot of people have. They've just come out. But I think this was a cleanup so that it wasn't everything under the AoE gets pushed in. It's now everything within 2 inches of the model hit. Directly hit, sorry.
Gotcha. Okay, we can skip right down to page 8, which is into the stuff that's changed for Menoth. It was announced that Menoth would only see a couple of changes. One is the Eye of Truth. The Gaze of Justice range weapon gains damage type fire. I believe did it not already have that, but it was like not printed in a book or something along those lines?
That's correct. It was correct on the War Room, on the card, but not on the in the book.
And this, of course, is one of the first battle engine changes. The Vessel of Judgment's Eruption of Faith. Replace the second sentence of Eruption of Faith with the following. When this miracle is used, enemy models within 2 inches of this model suffer an unboostable POW 12 damage roll and the fire continuous effect and are pushed 4 inches away from this model in the order you choose. Well, I think we have to ask Menoth's John about it because it's in his name.
No damn clue what changed. I tried to look this thing up, and
it's unboostable now. That's what changed. Before you could boost.
Okay, cool. Thank you.
No problem.
That's why we bring on all the experts.
Well, I was sitting there looking, that's kind of how I had always done it, but I guess I had never taken advantage of the boosting, so now I don't have to worry about that.
All right, I'm just going to hand. I think the person that can talk most about Khador right now is going to be Scott. You've already admitted to owning 300 Berserkers, right?
Yeah, Mad Dog.
Khador is being hit pretty hard. Let's go through the changes with you, and you can tell us a bit about what's changing here.
All right. Well, where do you want to start?
Let's start with Irisk.
Well, Irisk is not one I've actually played too much for. So basically, they're just changing some wording on his feat. When a friendly faction warrior model makes a tough roll of 4, 5, or 6, while in his control range, remove 1 damage point from that model. Cleaning up the wording is my guess, because I don't think that's changed.
So I think the biggest one that people were hoping to see change massively was Karchev. His Unearthly Rage feat has changed. Is this a big enough change to Karchev?
Karchev's been hit pretty hard for sure, because not only is, once we get to the Mad Dog change, but now his battle group does not get boosted attack rolls. Now it's just melee damage rolls, and their melee weapons get magical type. Well, they become magical. But he lost basically half or a third of his feat. Because before he got boosted attack and damage rolls, now he's just getting boosted damage rolls. So now Go ahead.
I was going to say, let's just put this in context with the Mad Dog spam, because this is what we were waiting to see how Mad Dog spam would change. How did Mad Dogs change, and how does this affect the whole Mad Dog spam?
Well, Mad Dog spam was because there were 7 points, and you could easily fit 10 of them into a list. They got increased to 9 points. So one of the limiting factors of the Mad Dogs was they were Mat 5. So with Karchev's original feat being able to have boosted attack rolls, the Mat 5 guys would get work done, versus like Legion Heavies and stuff, which could be, upwards of Def 15 or 17, depending on what's going on, and the Mad Dogs could hit and kill them. Now Mad Dogs are 9 points, so they went up 25% or so. Their jury rig got changed, so it says replace the jury rig speed special rule with fleet. And now fleet is once per activation, this model can spend 1 point to gain +2 movement when advancing as a part of its normal movement that activation. The problem with this is that it's going to spend 1 to do that and then 1 to charge, which now means it blows up that running. That's it. So before it would be able to jury rig for 1 point of movement damage, get +2 speed, and then run, which would give it speed 6, run 12 inches. Now it can run 10 inches and blow up. So it's a pretty big Mad Dog hit, for sure. But
how do you feel like are the Mad Dog spam levers going to go into general revolt, or were they all kind of expecting this change?
We were expecting some change, but I think they've gone too far now, because you could have just done a 2-point increase and left it, or you could have just changed jury rigged and left it. But now by doing both of those and Karchev's feat, it's dead. I will be surprised if you see 10 Mad Dogs on the table ever again. Which is probably what everybody wanted. Let's face it, PP sold out of their Mad Dogs. They're happy with their sales. What does it matter now? And they thought ahead. What's the first thing a Mad Dog player would have done with a 2-point increase? Let's spam Berserkers instead. So what did they do? They raised the points of the Berserkers by 1. So now they're 9 points as well. And they never got taken. So it's sad days for Khador.
Well, that moment of silence for Khador.
I mean, there's other changes too.
What about-
Like Behemoth got a 1 point increase, which makes me laugh because most of my Khador lists are actually 74 points. So that doesn't really affect me personally, but that's only because I'm bad at list building.
What about the other changes to the point cost, like destroyers? Is that a big deal? Like the destroyer going up some more points?
Destroyer went down 2 points. It was 16 points
down,
before.
Okay.
Yeah, so that's pretty good. Does that mean you're going to see a bunch of them on the table? Yeah, but I think it just keeps my list the same, and I have an extra 2 points in there to maybe change something out.
What about the change to? Sorry, what about the changes to Zerkova? Is that the Grave Door now does the affected model cannot activate? Is that a huge change at all?
I have not played her, so I don't know.
All right, moving right along.
The Marauder got
interesting
because it's a siege weapon. It now says replace the text of siege weapon with the following. This weapon gains an additional die to its damage rolls against huge base models. And that's kind of neat, I guess.
And the Spriggan change looks like it's just a fix, right?
Don't
Sorry,
know.
John, what was that?
PAL 16 Weapon Master seems good on the charge.
I like it.
Yeah, they didn't know what to do with Siege. Back when they were working on the Mark III rules, they still had all the building rules in, and then when they dropped all the building rules, they still had Siege in, and they hadn't changed it. So they decided to actually change the Siege rule so that it had some effect instead of being dead on the card.
That makes sense then.
So anything that had Siege before, like the Crawler, has gained this new version of Siege where you can do additional die against huge bases.
Something else to note is the Winter Guard Infantry. They also got a point reduction since nobody was taking them because of the Rifle Corps. They got to reduce their points of the Winter Guard to 6 for the min and 10 for the max. So now you can get 10 guys for 10 points.
Wow.
You may now see some Winter Guard spam out there.
But I like how they toned down Joseph, though.
Joseph then would be the next one who got nerfed. Now, instead of it being an additional die to hit, it's the unit gets +2 to its attack rolls, which isn't horrible. It's probably what should have happened anyways.
All right, moving on. Well, we're sorry to all those people out there that were playing Mad Dog spam. Well, I'm not really sorry because I didn't have to play against it, but I do feel bad for those people that invested that in those models. But I guess we had to kind of expect some change. Let's move into Cryx. We've seen a change to Asphyxius. They did say that they were going to try to make it so that Cryx could handle gun lines better. As admittedly, we haven't seen as many Cryx players in the meta in general, and these changes big enough to bring back the golden age of Cryx. Let's go to Menoth. John, how do we feel about Cryx?
I still hate him. I hate him with every inch of my soul, and I think that I've been pretty straightforward about that. I think that as president of War Machine for Life, I did reach out to them, and this is as much as I could stomach without throwing up on the document itself. But honestly, I wasn't all that up because I haven't played but against one Cryx player in all of Mark III. And it seems to me that changing the Caustic Mist from upkeep to round is not good for Asphyxius. And I'm not sure what changed on the feet. So maybe somebody else can fill me in on that. I'm not sure why you guys bring me on other than for me to do the president for life of War Machine and Hordes shit.
Well, yeah.
I'm looking at Cryx, and I don't think they really addressed anything to do with a gun line. Bane Warriors got tough, which they should have kept anyways, so that's just bringing them back in line with Mark II. So I guess that's a little better. If you can roll a 5 or 6, then they'll stand back up with their Dead Rise. But the only thing they did was they gave Brute Thrall's Shield Guard.
But Brute Thralls are cheap, and And yeah, I mean, having that cheap a shield guard, that's pretty big effect.
I don't think so. I don't think that's enough. So you're going to take 3 brute guards and try to stand around with all your mech thralls and try to not get shot off the table? Signar's going to laugh at that and just be like, okay. And kill the brute in one shot anyways. I don't know. I don't think they've addressed this issue at all. I think they still needed to give the Styxis Raiders needed their advanced deployment back. You know, and they needed to get rid of the prayers and actually give them their +2 def all the time and not have it be one of the ones they have to select.
That's fair. We've also seen a lower in cost on their on the Wraith engine, and the Scarlock Commander now gives advanced deployment. We'll let the guys on the boards, if you're on the boards and you know anything about Cryx, and tell us how you feel about the changes to Cryx. Moving into Retribution of Cyriss, again, we saw a point cost reduction on the Arcantrix Force Generator, and Ossian, the Deadeye. We knew this was coming, Deadeye being replaced with Fortune. Pretty big change overall. It doesn't completely get rid of Ossian, but it tunes him down a little bit. George, how do you feel about the change to Ossian? Was this the right way to go?
I think it was. Ossian was just a terror for some people. I'm a Convergence player, and yeah, if I saw him, that was it. It was just off the table for me. You know, it doesn't make him bad or anything. I think it just tunes him down just that little bit.
Okie dokie. Moving right along, we saw a change in Viros's feat. Again, do we have anybody who's played enough Retribution to talk about this at all? Didn't figure. So if you've got a comment on that on the boards, feel free to jump in. Let's go to Convergence of Cyriss. George, you're pretty happy about the change to LeConte, huh?
Yeah, well, so basically before in Mark II, he had... I think it was called D-Cell at the time, which was -2 or +2 to their defense and armor. And for some weird reason, they changed that to deflection. In a faction that relies on being able to take the hit, having deflection was dumb because it made Def 10 Warjacks 12s and our Def 11 Warjacks 13s. What we really needed was our Def 18 guys going to 20 and our Def 20 guys going to 22, because that's what we're relying on as Convergence players to keep ourselves alive so that our Speed 4 Jacks can finally get to the enemy. This is, as far as I'm concerned, the right way to go. Dumping D-Cell or dumping deflection for D-Cell, which is the +2 arm instead of the +2 defense, still keeps it as toning him down a bit so that he doesn't give +2 defense to the few bits of our troops like the Angels that are actually hard to hit. But it gives the people who really needed it, the Jacks and stuff like that, the extra armor to survive through getting shot at for 2 turns before they got to their target.
So let's talk about the rest of the changes, because most of these are ridiculous. Reduced point cost on perforators, reduced point cost on Enigma Foundry, and the ionization servitor change. I mean, those all seem pretty good for you.
Well, the servitor change was just literally so you could put them on the table. They had the created rule, which meant that they didn't start on the table, and they never had spawned, which meant that they never were legally allowed to be put into play by the Prime Conflux. You could put them into play from the Prime Axiom, but the model that they came with, they couldn't be put on the table. Everybody basically ignored that because it was dumb. The drop in price to the Foundry isn't a big deal. From 5 to 4 is nice, especially when you're putting the pair of them in. Getting those 2 points back is nice. It's mostly... The thing that it's done in my war room is make a lot of 75-point lists 74 points, because there's nothing I can put in there for a point. The drop in cost of perforators actually makes me now look at them. because the perforators, I think, were too expensive for what they wanted to be, which is they wanted to be a Jack Hunter unit. With the armor piercing, they were able to actually, in Mark II, they were actually able to go Jack hunting with a group of 5 of them. But for their points in Mark III, you just couldn't do that. It was costing you more than you would use for a Jack to take Jack hunting. Now with this drop, they're at least the same option. It's like, I could take this or I could take this, not just, why would I ever bother using this unit?
Awesome. Moving right along. Not a lot of changes to Mercs other than some cleanups. The big change, or the only really change that might affect most people, is they've allowed the Ogryn Boker to be taken by minions now. It'll now work for Circle, Legion, Scorn, and Troll Bloods. That gives more shield guard on the table to people who can take minions. Do we need more shield guard as a whole right now? Really, is that a thing that's required at the moment, Scott?
I don't understand why it wouldn't have been allowed in there in the first place. I think it's just an oversight, and they were just putting it back where it should go.
Gotcha. Going into the changes, we'll try to speed this along because we're running into an hour now. Going into the changes on Hordes, they've reduced the cost on Trollkin Sluggers and Madrax. Both Madrax have seen some changes. We knew that Madrak needed some changes. Menoth, John, how do you feel about the changes to the Madrax?
Well, I think the change to Madrak 2 is really good, actually. I think that it prevents you from doing the surfing with the caster that he was able to before. And since he is no longer covered by his own feat, I think that it fixes one of the most egregious parts of that feat. It's still badass. Rock or an Axer under this is still just a holy terror. But making it so that Madrak, who can regenerate his own fury as he's skipping along doing his thing, is in not being able to do that is a big deal.
Scott, do you feel like this fixes it enough?
It does, for sure, because now it's going to be, like you said, an Axer or a Mulg or some kind of super soul that can go through and kill everything as long as it doesn't miss. But no more can Madrak go through, kill a Colossal, end up on your caster with 26 Fury left over, and then win the game. Those days are done.
And that's okay.
Yay!
What's wrong with that?
Okie dokie. What about Madrak 2? The rallying cry change. Is this a large effect, Menoth, John? Is this just a small one?
Well, this is Madrak 3, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah.
Oh, sorry, Madrak 3.
And no, essentially this is picking up the wording change on the damage point thing that was earlier in the errata. So I don't think this is a big deal.
Night Troll getting an increase in its mat to 6.
I like it. I use a Night Troll occasionally.
Still not going to take one.
Okay, guys, getting into the probably the thing that's going to be most contentious for Circle players, a thing that they knew was coming. Wormwood sees. We knew this change was coming. Most people had already theorized that his feat would change to command instead of control range. Let's go to George. How do we feel about the change to Wormwood?
I think everybody's breathing a bit of a sigh of relief, except people who were really enjoying their time in the giant forest of doom. It's basically the same feat, except that it's command range instead of control. I think it allows the opposing player to actually use that turn like everybody does for every other control feat. It allows you to ignore that turn and use it as a reposition turn, because before, basically half of your army was kind of stuck, and even with something like Haley's feat, at least you had the ability to reposition. With Wormwood's feat, you were just stuck down, and they could basically say, well, everybody's going to be basically 3 inches from where they are now. And just reducing it to command still gives all the vision blocking and everything else that you would have had before, and it makes them actually think about the positioning of their models.
Okay, so the changes to wolds. They said that this was coming, that wolds were going to be worth taking again. Scott, is this a big enough change to make wolds worth taking?
I think Greg started using them anyways, so he's happy about it, but I don't think you're going to see a ton of them out there.
The change to Sentry Stones and Mannequins. You can no longer do this during your turn. You now can only put your new mannequin in place on your maintenance phase. This is a big change to the way that these work. This no longer allows you to kill one of your own dudes and have it way far forward down the field. Menoth, John, this change was wanted. Is this enough to make it so that mannequins aren't the go-to for all circle players?
I think it'll help a lot. Being able to stop the projection forward, I think, is a big deal. Makes it more consistent with things that get placed back into the game after they get knocked out. Similar to like the tentacles on Hellmouth, I believe. I think this is a consistent wording with that. So I think it's a good thing.
I don't think
going to Scott.
I don't think they did enough here. I think the points still had to go up. They're still going to be auto includes.
I think, Scott, you're very, very critical of many of the changes that I implemented in this errata.
I did say that I think they missed the mark on a bunch of these. Sentry Stones is one of them for sure.
I wish I had a more informed opinion on the ones that you're asking me about, Will. It's like, here, let's ask Mouth John about something he never frickin' sees.
Well,
from someone who's died to Sentry Stones a lot, that's why.
Super cool, man.
Yeah, I've died to Sentry Stones plenty of times. They are not fun. I agree with you, Scott. I agree that this was not big enough when I saw the change. Although I think the problem really is, if you want a neutral opinion on it, is the problem is that if they nerfed it much harder than they did, they don't want to nerf them into oblivion, which of course.
Wait, why not? They nerfed Mad Dogs into oblivion. Why don't they do it to Sentry Stones? Let's be consistent here.
If something's good, kill it. All right, hey, Maelstrom, are you still there?
I am still here.
Hey, guess where we're going? It's time to talk about Legion.
Is it time to talk about Legion?
Oh, I gotta go.
I'm gonna let you just run with it. Let's go through the changes to Legion, starting with Bethane. Tell us what is good and bad.
Bethane was pretty much just a wording change. Nothing serious there.
All right. Afflictor? Afflictor?
Yeah. Afflictor, yes. So he gained a death, goes up to 13. I still won't use it. Blight Wasps. The Blight Wasps actually got a bit of a buff. So model gains a +1 cumulative bonus to melee attacks and damage rolls for each other model in this unit with the target of this model's melee attack in its melee range. So before, it was just the target model. So you had a hard time fitting more Blight Wasps in and getting that bonus. Moving on to the Nephilim Soldier. He gained Brutal Charge, which is nice. I probably still won't use him. Zuriel gained a point of strength, so he went up to P+S 16, which is good. Zuriel might be worth looking at again. And the big one, I think, was the Hellmouth. Everybody was kind of looking at. So the Hellmouth and Tentacles gained Soulless, which apparently is a bit of a nerf, unless you're really probably with, which it's a bit of a buff. I don't think it really affects. It doesn't affect the way I use the Hellmouth at all. The Tendrils now respawn if you have fewer than 3. One of them respawns in your maintenance phase, which eliminates the jank of killing one with your own model and then bringing it back and running it up the board to probably arc a spell through. It just gets rid of some of that ridiculous play that I think it's good to get rid of that kind of stuff anyway. It did gain rear attack, which is nice. So it can attack in its back arc now as well. So that's a bit of a buff. Overall, I mean, it got soulless and it changed to a maintenance phase spawn, but I still think it's a bit of a buff. It didn't go up in points, which a lot of people thought it would. So it's still a great piece to use.
All right, guys, we're going to skip most of what the changes to minions because a lot of it's just basically clarifications. The biggest change, though, is Alton Ashley is going to be worth another point, and Lanissa Rosal is going to be worth another point. Scott, is the changes to Grievous Wounds, to Colossals, and the increase in points on Alton Ashley a big enough change to Ashley to make it normal?
No, I still would be putting him in my list because when you play against Ret and they have what's the dude's name with the double swords? Vindictus. Imperatus. Yeah, when he's got Imperatus, he still wins you that matchup every time. So the fact that it still works on War Beasts and War Jacks and everything, he's still going to be pretty good.
But at least you're paying the extra point for him, right?
Yep, that's that, man.
Okay,
that extra point's worth it.
Okay, ladies and gentlemen, I think we're going to wrap it up from here. There's some slight changes to the wordings of your theme forces. You can take a look at that. You guys can all comment on it. I don't see anything in it that's super ground shaking, but hey, what the hell do I know? I think that's it from us here from the special report. Are there any major comments or concerns coming from the boards at all, Maelstrom?
No, everybody seems to be just digesting at this point, I think.
Fair enough. So now that we've gone through it and we've done a full breakdown, let's go through our panel quickly. PG Semi-Automagic, any final thoughts?
I think the biggest changes in this errata are not in this errata. I think the biggest changes in this errata are in the insider announcing this errata. I think that what we've seen in the errata are all good balancing changes that are, some people are going to say they don't go far enough, some people are going to say they've gone too far, but you can't, with any document like this that is a living document, you're always going to have this, pull back and forth. I think the biggest changes and the things that will have the longest ramifications are the stuff in the Insider. And if you're listening to us now, please join us for Moosemachine tonight, where we're going to talk about this a little bit more depth with the extended playtesting cycles and the lack of printed cards and models. I think that's the biggest thing that's happened today.
Let's go right to Scott. Scott, how are your final? Now we've gone through this, how do you feel?
That's all fine. Like I said, I'm excited. I love the game. I always support it. The dust will settle. I know you didn't go over the themes, but I will mention that the Trollbloods did get an interesting fix to their Scornergy, if people didn't catch that. When a model is boxed by a melee attack made by a warrior model in this army, you can choose to have the box model removed from play. That now fixes it for Madrak 2's feet, so that way the guys can continue to munch on or remove something from play if they want to. That's kind of big for Trolls.
Interesting. Manath John, final thoughts?
I think that I did a fine job on this errata. I know, Scott and I may disagree on a few fine points, but, I think that, Scott, I'll make sure that my people call your people and they have lunch, and we get a little bit more input from you on the next set of erratas. I'd like to welcome everybody to the official release of Mark III. Now that the beta test is finally over, heard it in June. It was an experiment that we're not sure that I would necessarily repeat, and I think that going forward, this is going to be a brand new, wonderful day. We're going to make Warmachine and Hordes great again, and urge you all to tune in to Penny with Menoth John on Sunday night, where we will discuss the errata and how that will affect how I will paint my models.
Fair enough. All right. Well, I'll leave you with my final thoughts. I don't really have any. Give me a couple of weeks to actually play. Hey, and they didn't change anything to my Jack spam, so I'm pretty stoked about the whole thing.
Stupid gun bunnies. How do they not fix gun bunnies?
Life is good. All right, ladies and gentlemen, that's it from us here at Moosemachine, Menoth John, and Party Foul. We will see you all on the Moosemachine Network. Good night, everybody.
Good night, everybody.
Good night, everybody.